The conversation around trigger warnings has grown increasingly heated in recent years. What began as a well-meaning effort to shield individuals from potentially distressing content has evolved into a polarizing debate. Are trigger warnings a necessary courtesy in a sensitive world, or are they inadvertently promoting fragility and avoidance? First, let's understand what is trigger warning. Trigger warnings are brief alerts often placed before media, lectures, or even social media posts, warning the audience about potentially distressing content such as violence, abuse, or sensitive themes like suicide or racism. The intention is simple: protect those who have experienced trauma from reliving painful memories. However, the controversy lies in the execution and the impact. Some argue that they promote mental health awareness and empathy. Others claim they are turning society into a group of hypersensitive individuals incapable of handling adversity. The phrase emotional coddling gets thrown around quite a bit.
If you're in doubt of whether you should give a trigger warning or not, always do.
Trigger warnings.
Trigger warnings.
They know they don't work.
Romeo and Juliet. Did you know at the Globe Theater, it comes with a trigger warning?
Production contains suicide and violence. Well, spoiler alert.
Trigger warnings are no longer confined to literature or film. Brands have jumped aboard the sensitivity train, sometimes rolling a bit too far. Around Mother's Day, companies like Levi's, Kay Jewelers, and DoorDash started issuing emails giving customers the option to opt out of receiving Mother's Day promotions. Kay Jewelers went as far as stating, "Mother's Day can be a challenging time." DoorDash added, "Mother's Day may be a difficult time for some." While well-intentioned, these gestures raise questions. Are we becoming a society where every event, no matter how routine, needs a preemptive warning?
If you thought it was okay for companies to promote Mother's Day or Father's Day online, well, guess again. Chris discovered that could be triggering.
Look what Levi's sent customers ahead of Mother's Day. They acknowledged that Mother's Day could be triggering and gave customers the option to opt out of their promotions. Kay Jewelers did the same, adding Mother's Day can be a challenging time. Even DoorDash recognized the trigger and posted Mother's Day may be a difficult time for some.
That was a trigger.
Netflix 13 Reasons Why sparked intense backlash due to its depiction of teen suicide. Despite providing trigger warnings, critics argued it glamorized suicide and contributed to mental health crises among teens. This case reignited the debate over whether trigger warnings actually protect or inadvertently harm viewers by focusing too much attention on the distressing content.
Intense backlash surrounds the popular Netflix show 13 Reasons Why. The controversial series depicts teen suicide.
Chris Guerra, senior news anchor at Merritt Street Media, encapsulated the concerns succinctly. Trigger warnings don't work. In fact, they may create the very anxiety they're trying to prevent.
Welcome, Chris Gutierrez, senior news anchor for Merritt Street Media. Chris, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
It's a big problem because I think it's symptomatic of a mindset of coddling people and not preparing them for the next level of life.
He equated emotional resilience to physical fitness. You don't get stronger by avoiding the gym. Likewise, mental resilience is built through facing, not avoiding, difficult topics. Therapy, counseling, and exposure, not tiptoeing, help individuals heal.
One thing I should point out is that when it comes to these trigger warnings, the experts will say that they're not specific enough.
Further supporting this, multiple studies reveal that trigger warnings may heighten anticipatory anxiety without actually reducing distress once the content is consumed. In some cases, they even reinforce the belief that people are too fragile to cope, undermining personal growth.
In a general setting. The one that really stuck out to me is in London, Romeo and Juliet. Did you know at the Globe Theater, it comes with a trigger warning?
Yeah, and it's interesting what it says. I mean, let's take a look at this. Globe Theatre, London. Upsetting Romeo and Juliet. Production contains suicide, violence, reference to drug use, gunshot sound effects, and stage blood. Provides helpline after show.
One example that perfectly illustrates the escalation of trigger warnings is a modern production of Romeo and Juliet at London's Globe Theatre. Yes, you heard that right. Shakespeare himself got a trigger warning. The production comes with a disclaimer that reads, contains suicide, violence, references to drug use, gunshot sound effects, and stage blood.
Production contains suicide and violence. Well, spoiler alert. In case you didn't know, somebody commits suicide in here, and this is about two people.
Right.
One of them's going to kill themselves.
Additionally, it offers a helpline after the show. While it's commendable to care about the audience's well-being, one can't help but smirk at the fact that a 400-year-old play, famous for its double suicide ending, now needs a spoiler alert disguised as a trigger warning. If you didn't know Romeo and Juliet die, that's on you.
If you hover over your children, if you keep people from experiencing stress, strain, a degree of anxiety, they're never going to learn. And it's not just that trigger warnings don't work, which they don't. It's that trigger warnings have been shown to create the very anxiety, the very panic, the very things that they're trying to protect the person from.
Right.
Despite the data, studies show that 50 to 75% of universities still employ trigger warnings. Why? Critics argue it's not about effectiveness, but appearance, a textbook case of virtue signaling. Institutions don't want to seem insensitive, even if the research suggests they're not helping anyone.
And depending on what resources you look at, 50 to 75% of universities use these, and they have access to the same research that I have access to, which means they know they don't work. So why are they using them anyway? Because they're virtue signaling. And to me, that seems incredibly hypocritical to do something they know does not work, knows does not teach coping skills, knows does not prepare and toughen up the person for the next level of life.
This tendency toward public displays of empathy without measurable impact raises another question. Are we preparing students for the real world, or are we wrapping them in academic bubble wrap?
The trigger warnings that people really care about: racial violence, slavery, pedophilia,
mobbings and lynchings, domestic violence, sexual assault, relationship abuse, yelling. If someone's experienced that as a child, words of warning are helpful.
Teachers are able to still teach what they want to teach, just with a caveat of saying that this can be sensitive to others.
If you've gone through sexual assault, obviously you should get a heads up, because those mental emotions and feelings can absolutely manifest into physical symptoms and even hospitalization, which is something I don't think the older generation understands. We as Gen Z, we've prioritized mental health so much more.
On the other side of the debate, many Gen Z students passionately defend trigger warnings. Claire Ting, reporting from Cornell University, shared perspectives from students who believe that trigger warnings are an act of love. They create space for conversations about difficult topics. Mental health is prioritized more than ever.
We've been subject to trauma. The trigger warnings, this is more an act of love. A small thing we can do that eases pain for people in a very, very hurtful world. Thank you so much.
For them, it's not about avoiding content, but about having the emotional preparation to handle it. Especially for survivors of trauma, a simple heads up can make the difference between engaging or experiencing physical symptoms, even hospitalization. The debate rages on. What's clear is that somewhere between compassion and coddling, we need to find balance, because life doesn't always come with a warning label. And let's be honest, if Shakespeare needs one now, what's next? A PG-13 rating on the evening news? If you like this video, or at least mildly entertaining, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss a deep dive like this. And hey, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Are trigger warnings necessary safeguards, or are they holding us back? Drop your take in the comments below. I'm ready for the debate.